Hind and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. In my endeavor to understand the entire Russian invasion into Ukraine, or the Ukraine crisis as it is popularly known, I'm trying to analyze all different aspects. I'm sure you've seen my other videos as well. Today I have with me Air Marshal Anil Chopra, who's going to take us through a very interesting aspect that is very less spoken about, the air power involved in this war. Air Marshal Chopra, who's today the Director General for the Center of Air Power Studies, is going to take us through and tell us what are the salient features of this war and probably a little insight on what could have been done. Thank you, sir, for joining me.
Thank you, Aadi. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and this is my third episode with you, and each one has sort of enriched me as much as I hope I have enriched the viewers. Yes.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words. Sir, just to begin with, can we just go through an overview of the conflict as we see it today? It's a developing situation, but tell us what do you think is happening on the ground, sir?
Yeah, Aadi, global attention at this moment continues to be on the very serious conflict that began on 24th February, just last month. About today, I think the 11th or 12th day when Russia invaded Ukraine. The Russo-Ukrainian war actually began in 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine. Ukraine is the second largest European nation after Russia, with an area of 600,000 square kilometers roughly. It is, if I may put it in correct context, nearly 4 times the size of Bangladesh, which we sort of helped liberate in 1971. So that is the scope, much larger country. After the dissolution of Soviet Union, Ukraine became an independent country, and it chose a foreign policy that would balance cooperation with the European Union, Russia, and other influential countries. The people of Ukraine had been divided between the pro-Russian and pro-European leaders. The revolution of dignity of February 2014 culminated in the ousting of pro-Russian President Viktor Yanukovych, who refused to sign a political association with free trade agreements with the EU. You know, Ankit, I must tell you that Adi, I have been in Russia for 4.5 years. I understand what the feelings in Russia about Europe and the rest of the world are. I've been to Kyiv a couple of times for my project work, and I understand what their feelings are. Both the sides, both the Russians and the Ukrainians actually are pro-Europe. They all want to be, towards Europe, but they, of course, have their own security and other concerns. The strong pro-EU surge of public opinion was of concern to Russia. Crimea, which is part of Ukraine, was important for Russia as its Black Sea fleet was housed in Crimea under a formal treaty with Ukraine. But a pro-EU government could upset such an arrangement. It would have been very serious geostrategic implications for Russia. And Russia thus intervened militarily and annexed Crimea, and also created self-proclaimed breakaway states of Donetsk and Luhansk. Now, Ukraine hereafter became even more pro-EU nation. More recently, there was a move to make Ukraine part of NATO. Russia had been cautioning the West against getting them to join NATO because that would mean NATO would come onto their borders literally. So earlier, the Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia, Bulgaria, Romania, they all had joined EU, and Russia was not very happy. And Ukraine's membership of EU and NATO would have complete the Western Wall would have come, next to Russia, and Russia's access to Black Sea itself could have been denied. With South Korea and Japan on the other side being allied to US, the Russian government was concerned that Russia was being ring-fenced by potentially hostile powers from all these sides. Meanwhile, Russia backed separatist militias in Donetsk and Luhansk and people's republics in Ukraine's economically important Donbass region bordering Russia. And this region has a Russian ethnic majority. Now, after the current president, Vladimir, he and Putin have the same first name, though slightly spelled differently, Zelensky, took oath of office on 20th May 2019. Amendments were made to Constitution of Ukraine, which enshrine the irreversibility of the country's strategic course towards EU and NATO membership. And this was, I think, the final nail, because once you make it constitutionally mandatory for Ukraine to join EU and NATO, now that was not acceptable to the Russians. And in 2021, Russia began military buildup on the border on the pretext of exercises with Belarus, and the whole escalation of tensions took place. In December 2021, Russia issued a set of demands to withdraw its troops from the Ukrainian border. And these demands included a permanent ban of Ukraine's entry to NATO, reduction of NATO forces in the Eastern Europe area, and pullback of missile systems and military deployments from near Russia's borders. The United States, unfortunately, or from their point of view, responded by sending a strong message that any Russian invasion would be met with dire consequences for Russian economy. And finally, on 24th February, we all know Russia invaded Ukraine, which prompted Ukraine to break diplomatic ties with the eastern neighbor. It is in Russia's interest to install a Russia-friendly government in Ukraine. If I was in Putin, I would want to do that. As is the case in Belarus, the Russian military is targeting mostly military targets so that to capitulate the resistance, and of course they are hitting communication systems, including TV towers, because they want the narrative should come back in their control, which presently is to some extent with the Ukrainians. Since ultimately they have to govern this nation with their own, puppet government. They don't want the infrastructure to be totally destroyed because they'll have to really build it again. Now, I must tell you that many analysts, including some very important famous people in the West, including Henry Kissinger and many others, had warned that to Russia, Ukraine can never be just another country, and that the West therefore needs a policy that is aimed at reconciliation and find some via media, because this sensitivity of Russia has to be addressed. Putin has been adamant Ukraine should never join NATO. Russia also used the N word, the nuclear word, in case he was pushed too hard. And Ukraine had also had nuclear weapons during Soviet Union time, but when Soviet Union broke up, they renounced these the same. Some are even asking if they had not taken this decision and kept the nuclear weapons, perhaps the state what it is today would not have happened. And the ground position today in Ukraine is significant gains for Russia from the south, primarily because they're coming from Crimea side. They have come right up to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, and in the east, Luhansk and Donetsk. And Mariupol port in Black Sea, they have already captured. And Kharkiv has been encircled, which is the second biggest town of Russia. From the north, they have to come to Belarus because Kyiv is the closest point to Kyiv, which is the political base of the country. The capital has to come. They have already crossed the Chernobyl nuclear plant, and they are right now parked close to Kyiv. Kyiv is under attack. Ground war is moving slowly but steadily, but there is solid resistance. With this little background, I thought I will tell you how the build-up to this war took place and where are we today, at macro level as far as the ground war is concerned. Please, yes.
Thank you for that, sir. I think you've clarified quite a bit. As a matter of fact, the constitutional amendment of Ukraine is not being spoken about that freely and openly within the mainstream media, I guess, to control the narrative of this entire war. And I think it is offbeat platforms like us which is going to talk about the reality of the situation, because it's not all rosy as what is being portrayed in the media in terms of the Russian invasion, if I may put it that way, sir. So Ukraine also has a decent air force for its size, mostly obviously of Russian origin. Why don't you tell us what they have and what are the capabilities, sir?
Yeah, Ukraine Air Force, after all, they all were a single country in Soviet time, mostly, and there were many Soviet aircraft building plants within Ukraine, Kyiv, and other areas. And so therefore, the assets with Ukraine have, by and large, are somewhat identical to what the Russians have got, because they are of Russian origin. Of course, they have their own industry to upgrade them, etc. Ukraine still possesses, today, Ukraine is around 27th largest air force of the world. It is 7th largest air force in Europe, largely due to the ability of the domestic industry, which includes Ukробron and Antonov and their subsidiaries. They've been able to maintain the inventory. They've been able to upgrade the the Ukrainian Air Force is around 36,000 personnel, 225 aircraft, about 100 of which are fighter bomber class. We all very warmly remember there are two large aircraft of Antonov, the AN-124, which continues to fly. There are about 10, 12 of them. All the countries in the world, including America, China, India, have been using that aircraft to transport large-sized cargo. And of course, they had built one world's largest plane, the AN-224, or also called the Mriya. Mriya means dream in Ukrainian, which got destroyed a few days back, 4 days back during the war. The only one aircraft that had been built. Remember, this aircraft is so huge. I've seen it fly in at the Paris Air Show. It has 6 engines, 32 wheels. It can lift 650 tons, which is even more than the Airbus 380. So really a large aircraft, and I felt very, very sorry to see this destroyed. Meanwhile, the Antonov Design Bureau, which is named after its chief designer, like all Soviet bureaus were named after, is the main company based in Kiev. It has, these Antonov guys have built over the years since Second World War 22,000 aircraft. That's one huge number. India used to operate the AN-12. We still have about 100 AN-32s. As recently as December 2016, the Ukrainians came out with the AN-132, which is a new aircraft. Of course, in the Ukrainian inventory are AN-24, AN-26. They have the S-300 missiles. They have Russian origin tanks. They have been upgrading their service life. The fighters are mostly MiG-29, Su-24s, and Su-25s, which are ground attack aircraft, and Su-27. L-39 trainers are also used for ground attack. Given sufficient funding from their complex, the foreign manufacturers have also been trying to support Ukraine with their servicing. They have been air engagements. We are all aware. We all have been hearing about this fellow called Ghost of Kiev, the nickname given to the disputed MiG-29 Falcon flying ace, credited with shooting down 6 Russian planes in Kiev offensive on 24th February 2012 itself. And according to the security service of Ukraine, he has reportedly shot down 10 aircraft in the next 4 days after that. Although not confirmed to be real, the Ghost of Kiev has been credited with a morale booster for the Ukrainian public. Although some sources consider that the Ghost of Kiev is an urban legend or a war propaganda. Its status has nevertheless been credited with a major boost of morale, as I mentioned. Similar to the Ghost of Kiev, on 26 February, they came out in social media another for the Ukrainian ground forces, a soldier dubbed Ukrainian Reaper, who supposedly killed over 20 Russian soldiers in combat single-handedly. So this kind of action has been there. The Russian Defense Ministry has claimed that over 100 air defense systems and over 90 aircraft have been disabled or destroyed by them by the 6th of March. No official figures are available. Both sides are inflating the figures and giving it. And the Western media is giving all the figures that suits their narrative. Ukraine has American and Turkish UAVs. We saw the video footage from one of the UAVs when this Mi-25 was shot by a Stinger missile. Significant air defense systems, including S-300 missiles, with nearly 500 missiles have been there with them. Of course, the West has been pumping in man-pads and anti-tank missiles in large number. So all I want to tell you is a country which is 4 times the size of Bangladesh has an a significant air force. It is not the same thing what happened to us in 1971 when we could have air superiority immediately. And the Pakistan Air Force was literally closed down within 3 days. And still, it took us 15 days to 14 days to run through Bangladesh, where the population was in our favor. But in this case, the population is mostly pro-West. And therefore, it's a big challenge. But Ukrainians are fighting well, yes.
As a matter of fact, yes, and who can forget these whole videos about the legends that you speak about? They're very interesting videos that have been made. I must say, some social media people are sitting and creating a whole lot of content for the Ukrainians to put out as propaganda. So, coming to the Russian Air Force, mighty Air Force, great aircraft. What do they carry in this battle, sir?
Russian Air Force, even today, is the second largest with nearly 3,800 aircraft. This is what the open source information is, and that includes nearly 8 bomber squadrons. And we all know they have these big bombers, Tu-22 supersonic bombers, and Tu-95. They have the Tu-160. So 8 squadrons of these. They have close to 37 fighter squadrons, which include the MiG-29s, the MiG-29 variants, 2-3 of them. Then MiG-31s, they have Su-27. Su-27 has also got 3-4 different variants. They have the Su-30, nearly 100 Su-35s. Of course, they also have a large number of attack squadrons, which are mainly comprising of Su-24 variants and Su-25 variants. And of course, they operate 3 squadrons of Su-34. All these variants have been visible. We have seen videos of these appearing in social media. They also have 10 attack reconnaissance squadrons operating the Su-24 MR and also operating the MiG-25, some of them for reconnaissance. They have only around 14 fifth generation fighters, Sukhoi Su-57, so they are not yet operational. So they are still under operational evaluation, so they can't be used. But they are sort of weak on some other areas. The number of squadrons of AWACS/AEWC is very less. They just got, about a dozen of these aircraft. The tanker, the IL-78 base, similar to what we have got in India. The numbers are very small. Russia has about 300 modern combat aircraft in this region where the war is going on. That is their normal deployment. Of course, some of the regiments air regiments have moved in from east towards the border. Russia's, of course. So this is the kind of deployment vis-a-vis the total numbers, which are large. Some people are saying that they are not moving all the assets here because they have to cater for a possible war with NATO. And so Russia is on that count careful. But there are others who feel that Russia should have brought in their air power in much larger numbers so that the victory can be much faster. Now, Russia's modern strategy, the Gerasimov doctrine, which is very famous and read in all the war colleges of the world, says the very rules of war have changed with that, and the role of non-military means of achieving political and strategic goals has grown, and in many cases they have exceeded the power of force or weapons in their effectiveness. All this supplemented by the military means of concealed character. Now, Gerasimov is an army general, lieutenant general. And he is being attributed to this doctrine. There are many who feel that this doctrine is not originally his, and these are borrowed parts from China and some other countries, including the Americans. Has this scheme worked? There are doubts, but certainly the scheme of things they have used. They used it in U.S. presidential elections to influence the results. Former captive nations like Georgia, Estonia, Lithuania, all have sounded alarm in recent years about Russia attempting to influence their domestic politics through these cyber and cyber means. Russia did that in Crimea. Same was being done in Ukraine, but was only partially working. So Russian Air Force, a large Air Force, underutilized at this moment, and we hope this war comes to an early end. But from Russia's point of view, I think they needed to use the air power much better. Yes.
Absolutely, sir. As a matter of fact, I could see that your intent would be to say that, because that's one of the biggest criticisms that has been put out for this war. Talking about this, what would be a typical air campaign that one would plan for a war like this, and how would it go by?
Yeah, Adi, we've all seen all kinds of air campaigns, whether it was in Second World War, in Korea, Vietnam, in the Middle East, Iraq, Afghanistan, and of course before that in Kosovo. Air has made a big difference in many campaigns. Of course, some campaigns are not a good example because there was too much of asymmetry, which is not the case currently. But there is still a reasonable amount of asymmetry between the Russians and Ukrainians. Military aircraft are used in both offensive and defensive purposes. In offensive role, the aircraft are used to destroying enemy vital installations, airstrips, ordnance depots, supplies, supply chains, the convoys, interdiction of enemy lines of communication, close air support to their own forces, and also to deter the threat and threaten the enemy from making air strikes. In the defensive role, of course, there is the main thing is the defense of your own land, that is through air defense. In this particular case, since the offensive is not towards Russia, the operations of this kind are mainly against Ukraine, and therefore there is no air defense element from Russian side, but all air defense activities primarily from Ukraine. They have to shoot down the enemy aircraft. We will talk some about the actual operations as we go along, but certainly they have used these surface-to-air missiles. The other areas is, of course, for naval warfare, the military aircraft plays a significant role to detect and neutralize submarines and warships to keep the seacoast free from the enemy attack. Military aircraft also provide the logistic supplies to forward bases, airlifters, cargo. They can move the troops, they do paradrops, they will do the rescue operations, they will handle major disasters. And of course, then there are these helicopters which will move forward with great amount of logistic support and firepower. Military aviation includes fixed wing and rotary wing, aircraft and unmanned aerial vehicles. From the early days of military aviation, it has been realized that air power supremacy is vital for winning a war, and therefore we, practitioners of air power, felt strongly that if Russia really wanted to, if they had to have air dominance, they should have used everything possible to cyber, electronic warfare, to neutralize the radars, which are giving inputs to stingers, and the flying is still going on. Many of the air bases in the western side have not even been hit. So there are large types of air operations, and some of which we all learned also during the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Yes.
Interesting, sir. So, what would be the general attributes that you've noticed about the use of air power by both the sides, if I may, during this campaign, and anything specific that you've noticed, which is something that is struck out to you, sir?
Yeah, firstly, let me quickly tell you what are the attributes, and then we all will be, as we discuss more about the air war, you will get answers to some of these questions. There is a famous saying, now all the major air forces, the Americans and Chinese, they all use this term now, and so have we started. Whoever controls the air generally controls the surface. Air power is an inherently strategic force, deterrence, coercive power. But none of these attributes have yet been used by the Russians. Air power is primarily an offensive weapon. Yes, they have been doing offensive, but have they achieved their results of offensive? There is a question mark. In a sense, air power is targeting. Targeting is intelligence. Intelligence is analysis. Analysis is effects of the air operations. And air power produces physical and psychological shock. When you see these, when we do these interviews on television, everybody, what makes impact on public is when they show a huge bomb having been dropped on an area, destruction of a major building, a bridge from the air. That is what makes a psychological impact. Air power therefore produces physical and psychological shock. Air power can conduct parallel operations at all levels of the war simultaneously. It can be from very low level, supporting an army column to dropping a strategic weapon. And precision air weapons have redefined the meaning of mass. You can take out bunker by bunker. Of course, these precision weapons are very expensive. Air power's unique characteristics necessitate that it should be centrally controlled. This kind of debate has been going on even in India when we did the theater command, discussions. And technology and air power are today integrally and synergistically related, because that is where the action is. The top-end technologies come into the air, and air power includes not only military assets, of course, it includes the industry, the commercial aviation, and everything that can get airborne is air power. And that is the attributes which the Russians should have used. And as we go along, we'll talk about how the air campaign has been run in Ukraine physically, and that should be making some interesting facts and figures. Yes.
I think it's time we hit towards that, sir. The air campaign in Ukraine, which is going to be the subject, and you've given us a very, very good brief with regards to what each side carries, how they are deployed, what are the strengths, weaknesses, and so on and so forth. That would give the audience a good base when you're talking about the air campaign, sir. So what did you observe? What happened since the 24th? And how did the campaign move forward, sir?
Yeah, just remember that like we in Bangladesh had a preparatory time, the Russians have had a preparatory time. For the last 6-7 months, they have been preparing. So the first thing in an air campaign they would have done in Ukraine is the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. That's called the ISR. They should have done enough of. They should have used satellites to get the battle orbit of the the situation on the ground. But actually, there was no battle orbit because Ukraine was not having any plans to fight a war. They were at their peacetime locations. It's the Russians who finally invaded. So as far as ISR is concerned, we presume that they would have had any amount of information, certainly of the batteries of air defense systems, which if they had the correct information, they should have knocked off in the first initial strikes. The second important part is about the air superiority and the counter-air campaign. As I said, Russia was expected to achieve air superiority, but they seems to not have been able to achieve that. As I said, the Western air bases have not been knocked off. We hardly saw any AWACS or AWC, not on the television screens, neither did any of the sides tweet such a presence. Maybe the numbers are so few, they may have kept them in depth, because if even one AWACS was to get, or refueler were to get knocked off, that will have a tremendous impact, and therefore, AWACS is not just for defense, they are also supposed to coordinate the fighter strikes, give tail clearance to save the aeroplane. The suppression of enemy air defenses, which have been done first to knock off the radar and missile batteries, the gain seems not fully achieved. Ukraine is a big country, but the Russians could have done much, much better in knocking off these sites. Yes, there are some missiles which are mobile, but some of them like S-300, it takes time for mobility. If you have done your ISR work well, you should have knocked them off. Certainly, every radar should have been knocked off. The main target for Russia has been the political centers. Kharkiv, which is the second largest city, was closest from the Russian side, and they were, of course, they had pro-Russian populations very close to that. And Kharkiv is what they did achieve. They have encircled it, but it was at cost of lives. Air power could have been used better, but of course, air power used in urban warfare has got its own limitations. Now, Ukrainians are counter-attacking the three armies, the combined arms armies that are moving from the north, from the west, and similarly, counterattacks are coming onto the Kharkov. If you notice that the Americans did not clear this no-flying zone over the area, because that would mean the direct participation of the NATO in the war, which was not acceptable. But they have given a large number of Stinger, close to 1,500 Stinger missiles and anti-tank missiles to them. The Russian Air Force could have could fly limited sorties in the north due to bad weather for some time, but got hammered by manpads, mostly losing on a single day on 5th March, they lost 4/5 aircraft Raptors. I just it doesn't have enough assets to support the wide-ranging front across the north, and Russian army still is struggling with supplies. They're all on a single road. We have seen some of the TV channels showing us these, and these could have been attacked better even by the Ukrainians, but obviously Ukrainians also have their limitations. The Western intelligence and weapons and continuous uninterrupted flow of these has another reason why the Russian offensive has got affected. The counter-surface force campaign or the tactical strikes on the ground targets, including by the helicopter gunships, have been there, but could have been much more. In fact, the ground rocket forces, the multi-rocket launch systems have made much greater impact when they have knocked off important headquarter buildings, or even some of them by mistake, the hospitals and things like that, and schools. Surprisingly, the Russian aircraft did not use the missile warning systems or the IR flares that must be there on every helicopter. 3 days back, the video that we have been all seeing of a helicopter being shot when he's coming at absolutely low altitude, we didn't see any flares, and it became a victim. Russian ISR and electronic intelligence components are obviously not delivering. The Russian closest support and the SIAD have also not worked to the kind of advantage. Some are saying that they have a lack of multi-role platforms. They are also saying their operational exposure and training standards are questionable. Perceivable attempts to use unguided munition by the Russians indicates that the Russians are running out of PGMs, because if you see the kind of weapons that are being dropped, they are trying to conserve the PGMs. We are not very sure. Either way, they will lose some of the top-end Sukhois through attrition if they were to keep using it for the normal conventional strikes. The manpads used by the Ukrainians have been very, very effective. Obviously, there are also doubts about the electronic warfare in terms of ASPJs, the self-protection jammers with some of the Russian aircraft, because otherwise they would be have been sort of shot the way they have been doing. People are asking, where are the Russian UAVs? We all have seen the Turkish UAVs and the Western UAVs, which are with Ukraine, but Ukraine has a much lesser role in the air power. They have to defend themselves. But where are the Russian UAVs? Where are the so-called limited UCAVs like the Orion available? So the lack of UAVs, both for attack and SIAD, are being questioned. Air defense shooting down many aircraft since war at all. In Ukraine only, there are not many air defense requirements otherwise of Russia, but there also their aircraft have got shot. We all know. I know some of the very famous Russian pilots who have died. Of course, even on Ukrainian side, some of the guys who were once famous for their aerobatic displays that they used to do. There has been no strategic bombing. There is no requirement. The infrastructure is not. But Moscow has set up oil depots ablaze using air as well as ground weapons. The transport and aircraft helicopter mobility has been lacking. Why I say it lacking is that long convoy, which is still waiting to move to Kyiv, is stuck. The tail has not caught up with the teeth. And of course, I do not want to comment about the blockade. We all know that the naval blockade has taken place because Crimea is in their control. So they have blocked, but to see the other side of it, these people told the Turkish government, they told President Erdogan to block the entry into Black Sea from the Turkish side, and Turkey has confirmed that they have done blocked the straits to belligerents. But they have also said that we will allow ships who are returning back to their base to pass through, but no fresh ship can go out. But the Russians are well off. They will be able to continue the war for at least few months without having to leave Black Sea, because they have a reasonable amount of assets in the Crimea area. Cyber warfare, electronic warfare, very important, have been underutilized. And psychological warfare, of course, extensive use of videos by Ukrainian population. People have taken their own mobile phones, uploaded, used Twitter, used satellite phones, and the Ukrainian TV has done a great job. And of course, the leadership and public morale. The President Zelensky has led from the front. 85% Ukrainians want to live in a democratic setup with the Western world, with democratic values. They have great strength. Even a pro-Russian government will get established one day, which is inevitable finally. Today is the day 12. Of course, the campaign is still unfolding. It's not going to be easy to govern, because ultimately you have to have people under you. One weak area has been, as I said, logistics, supply chain, long offensive army convoys have not been able to. You remember that in Bangladesh, we had used the Meghna River crossing by helicopter. Such bridges should have been made. Airborne assault was important for Russia, but that classical sense has not happened, even though special forces have been dropped around Kharkiv. Since Ukraine is presently neither a member of the EU or NATO, the West can only support monetarily, psychologically, through intelligence, and through these weapons that are already flowing in. And Russia have of course, now brought in Syrian volunteers to join the war. So things are only getting complex, yes.
Oh yes, today that volunteer or mercenaries, or how you may want to term it, that news has come out, sir. So the aircraft losses at both the sides, alarming, as a matter of fact. If you look at today's scenario with all the, as you also mentioned, the jammers and this and that, seems to be a little high in your opinion, sir. What is your reading of the losses that both the sides have incurred?
I will tell you, of course, both sides are giving exaggerated figures, but that's nothing new. This is normally there because morale has to be maintained. What we can make out is Russia has lost about 15 confirmed aircraft. And these include Su-25, Su-30, Su-34, Mi-25, and Mi-8. Mostly to ground fire, but also to air-to-air combat. So this is not a great figure. Of course, Ukrainians have lost similar numbers, but in their case, they lost nearly 6-7 MiG-29s on the ground. So they have not lost so many aircraft in the air. So if I may sum up, the number of aeroplanes lost are similar. Russia, because they are on the offensive. Russia lost also because they are coming within the ground-based air defense systems, but have lost also in the air. And Ukrainians mainly have lost a significant number of aeroplanes on the ground because of attack, including the famous AN-225, yes.
As a matter of fact, when the war began, there was a huge online campaign of a lot of aviation enthusiasts who were, trying to tell Russia not to bomb that aircraft, because that's not the Ukrainian aircraft, that's a world aircraft. Even the Russians use it. So, and that's a very sad picture. It was heartbreaking, sir.
Yeah, it was. And, as an aviation enthusiast and having actually seen it at an air show, this aircraft flight, when such an aircraft flew in the Western world, for example, I saw it in Paris Air Show. When they announced on the PS system that this fellow is starting up, taxing, the entire Western world, the entire public at the air show wanted to see this one. I myself was so excited, relatively young at that time. And this guy took his time to start up, to taxi, and such a huge fellow taxiing to the lineup point. At lineup point, he took his time, because after takeoff, he was to do one teardrop turn and set course back for his base. That time in Kyiv, and it was magnificent, absolutely a fantastic aircraft. Immediately after takeoff, a huge aircraft like that just put on, bank, and then turned away, saluting the public. I was really very, very touched with this loss. And I must tell you that the Chinese were trying to acquire this aircraft. They had plans to build about 6-8 of them. They were already negotiating with them. Of course, the Ukrainians were under pressure after the new president had come in. The Americans wouldn't let that happen. But now I think it's nearly a closed story. I hope the drawings are still with somebody there. Yes.
As a matter of fact, I hope so. So, you mentioned about the perception war or the narrative war and the galvanization of the free world which is happening today. We are hearing the Polish who are sending MiG-29s. Other countries which are using old Soviet aircraft are also supposed to be sending them. So there's a lot of feeling which has been created for Ukraine within the world. Absolutely, I agree with the humanitarian causes of it, but there's a lot behind the history that the West is not telling. But what do you see in this whole galvanization aspect, sir? How is this going to win the war or decide the war for Ukraine?
This galvanizing of the free world is going to have a long-term ramification for the whole world. I must tell you this, because as you said just now, that the Polish the MiG-29s are being offered because these guys need all kinds of help in Ukraine. There is a level of sympathy, but this whole war is huge geopolitics. People are questioning whether the Americans should have been concentrating more on neutralizing China, which is a much bigger economy with much great threat future, vis-a-vis trying to push Russia for the last many years into a corner, literally pushing them into the arms of China. But all that is now history for the time being. The West has got galvanized the entire lot. However, they are responding through massive crippling economic sanctions on Russia as a nation and on individual entities. Bulk of the Russians are holding cash in dollars. A bulk of the rich people from Russia have invested in the West. They've got bank accounts, they've got assets, they've got houses, villas and bungalows and palaces and castles. But they're all so the West is now galvanized. They are all supplying to Ukrainian defense military systems in whatever form, as we just spoke about. The Russian ruble has nosedived. The stock markets have hit the ground. In the countries have put embargoes on all trade. President Putin, on being cornered, even said that if you'll push me so further into the wall, I will even use every asset, including nuclear, at my in my hands. Major fallout of this conflict, the Western countries have got galvanized, have grouped together. Both Germany and Japan, which were after Second World War not allowed to raise, they are both set to increase the defense budgets. Korean and some other countries may be more willing to allow stationing of nuclear weapons on their own soil. They are telling the West, because that has become a sort of a way of ensuring security. Some of the traditionally neutral countries like Switzerland have chosen to take sides. Also, Sweden and Finland are now more open to joining NATO. An American military-industrial complex is going to benefit the most. In fact, some are saying that this whole exercise has the backing of the American military-industrial complex. They are going to benefit a lot, because all these European countries mostly will buy weapon systems from them. China and India, among the few others, have chosen to abstain during the voting in the United Nations as not to take sides. Notably, even China is being very careful not to take sides. But in the end, China may actually be a winner in this whole exercise. I will talk about this aspect a little later. It's generally wait and watch for many countries. Situation is fluid. Things are uncertain. Indians were concerned about the 20,000 Indian students. So we ran this Operation Ganga, and we managed our good offices with both Ukrainians and Russians to be able to get a large number of students to first come out of Ukraine into the neighboring countries, and then we all have flown Indian Air Forces, and the Air India has done an outstanding job. Great coordination by the government with the different embassies, and I must compliment even the MEA for what they have done. So there is a galvanization. There are going to be issues, but of course there will be lessons for all of us. Yes.
I think this war, and correct me if I'm wrong, sir, is going to go down as a narrative war and like never been fought before. A lot of narrative was created in previous wars, but this one is different, and it's basically got these blue and yellow flags on pretty much all social media profiles today. It's interesting, sir. So, we in India are watching this very carefully because at the end of it, we also have two very, very nasty neighbors on the side. Pakistan today doesn't have that kind of force, but China, of course, is a big threat. What would you take as a, former military aviator, a planner? How would you look at the lessons that India must learn in the aviation aspect?
Yeah, I will put it not only in aviation. We have discussed some of the kind of campaigns that needed to be done, have not been done, but certainly I will mention, after the Second World War, of course, in Vietnam, there was a face-off, but mostly Vietnam was getting backing from China and Russia. In the Korean War, the Russians physically fought, in the war, but it remained very localized. All other wars thereafter have been one-sided, and there were no major forces. But here, the entire NATO is facing up to Russia. The risks are very high, and this is a different ball game, not comparable to the ones we have had since Second World War. So there is everybody is treating with a little caution, but there are lessons from the current battles with the Ukraine and USA and the West. So that is one. Then the nuclear deterrence is another issue. If Ukraine had nuclear weapons, you wouldn't have had. I think it was a great decision by the Bajpayee government to go overtly nuclear. There are many other countries, the Iranians, the Israelis, everybody is wanting to have a nuclear weapon. Israel perhaps already has. So nuclear deterrence is another thing we have learned, because Putin is holding the whole world by telling them, I will nuke you if you try to come and fight with me. Whether there is an international treaty or not, friendships between countries will always come second to a nation, its own security and self-interest. We have seen that again. America has jettisoned countries left, right, and center over the years. So you have any alliances, anytime, it can be time-bound, but ultimately everybody looks at its own national interest, and therefore India must become self-sufficient in its arms industry as much as possible. It's absolutely necessary, because everybody is going to look at their own self-interest. Next, I want to mention is that anything can be weaponized today, especially after the kind of economic sanctions they have brought in. They've stopped the SWIFT, accounts, transactions. The entire civil aerospace has been blocked by all the parties. There is clearly that there are so many other ways that you can. International sporting bodies have been blocked. Social media has been blocked. Facebook is not, and Twitter have left Russia. All kinds of weapons are being used. Private companies like Google, Facebook, and others, they have taken political sides. So figure out how can you ring fence against this supposedly. Your own domestic companies must come out. We must have an alternate to Google, Amazon, to many other things. And this is despite the whole world is wanting to get globalized. There is a need for finding. And all this other thing I want to mention is that a large number of people on Twitter has been lecturing us Indians on human rights, freedom of speech, etc. They're all political tools. They've been questioning why we have not, in UN voted against the Russians. But in reality, this isn't because the people who are lecturing us themselves have not had a good human rights record when it came to Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, Libya, etc., etc. And some of the countries continue to exhibit superiority complex, but ultimately what counts is geography. For us, geography is bad. China and Pakistan, as you mentioned, are sitting next to us. But the Western world has also had double standards when it comes to a fight in Europe. They have a different standard when it comes to Asia and other countries. They have sort of different narratives. Building a strong narrative is important for influencing globally. Indian businessmen have done well. They are sitting on top, heads of top corporations. Perhaps India must buy more newspapers, TV channels, social media platforms globally. And we are very proud of some of the channels like Beyond, which has, taking India to all kinds of places. Africa, Asia, Australia, Latin and South America are not involved in the war, yet the global media narratives is screaming that whole thing is a world war, whereas it's a localized European war as far as we are concerned. So global media is making an impact, and India must take charge of such a global media in some form or the other. There is nothing called global rules-based order anymore. We see in United Nations have not been able to do much. International rules can always be rewritten, ignored. We saw China has ignored everything in South China Sea, even in arbitration court, international arbitration court, giving in favor of Philippines. They have just said, they're thrown into the wind. And finally, long-term winners in this war are likely to be my assessment. The long-term, who are going to be the winners, irrespective of what happens. Finally, Russia will take charge of Ukraine. And USA will win because they will have arms sales. Their dollar will strengthening, at least initially. They will have much greater hold in Europe. The French will, of course, gain also because they are relatively isolated from energy insecurities because they have a large nuclear energy security. China will be a gainer because Russia will be forced more into their arms, and therefore, China will benefit. Of course, the main loser perhaps will be Russia because of the economic mess that they will go into, isolation, and their over-dependence on China, which is the last thing that they ever wanted. Germany will, of course, also lose because they will have to now start spending much more in defense budgets, and an important market for them, right from toothpaste to to the cars, was Russia. I've been in Russia and I've seen how the Russians love the German stuff. India may also lose for some time because Russia will not be of much help to us as far as China is concerned. West will also remain calibrated. They'll keep putting pressure on us, and India may have to increase dependence on USA in the long run. So it's not a great idea for us either. But then that is what the general lessons for India are. Air power is important, but so is the ground forces, the maritime forces. We need to develop our island territories. We have to get back our fighter squadron strengths. We have to have more air bases, which we are already doing along the border with the north. We need to strengthen these electronic warfare. We have to strengthen cyber capabilities. Surely a lot needs to be done, but some of those lessons are already known to us, this war or no war.
As a matter of fact, yes, sir, this war is going to teach us, not us, actually the whole world, quite a bit. And we in India, if we need to move forward and become self-reliant, I think that's something which is you brought out, and it's coming out very clearly today. India needs to have its own autonomy and strategic autonomy to kind of act in its own will and its own interest. Sir, to summarize this amazing conversation, how would you look at the air power aspects, and is the world today going to be a little different in terms of the understanding of air power, looking at this particular campaign? The perceptions of air power, will they change? How do you look at it?
Yeah, first I want to mention is that despite that you are facing a much larger air force, if you can slow the advances, you can use a large number of air defense weapons, shoulder-fired missiles or anti-tank weapons. These two weapons have done exceedingly well. The Stingers, stroke other shoulder-fired missiles, even they've got Eagles, which are Russian missiles. And the second is the anti-tank weapon, because the offensive of the ground offensive is led by the tank, and the air offensive led by the strike aircraft. Both have been slowed down by these. So that is the first great lesson from this war. Ukrainians still have a significant majority of their air combat power available to them, both fixed and rotary wing, as well as unmanned systems. They have limitations to use them. But the surface-to-air missiles, as I said, is done very well. Air power has been underutilized, despite Russia having clear advantage in numbers and quality. Russia could have neutralized Ukrainian air defense assets. All the airfields, especially in the west, are still intact. There is a doubt about the combat status of the Russian Air Force, because they have had limited exposure in mostly in Syria. In fact, they've hardly had any major exposure. Russia has perhaps been conserving assets, as I said. Russia's losses too have been on the higher than what was expected. Shoulder-fired AD guns continue to be potent. Urban warfare brings body bags in both sides, and one can get bogged down. Even when Russia wins, governing a population that is inimical to them will be an issue. And lastly, the nuclear word being used was the most unfortunate. The nuclear doctrines are being relooked at in every country, including there are discussions in India that what does this whole madness mean? Because anybody who gets, we all know that Pakistan's doctrine is that if India was trying to break it down into further parts, surely they will use the nuclear weapon. That is an open doctrine that they have got. So entire nuclear doctrine is being put to questions today, and more countries would want to have nuclear weapons or open up their soil for others to use them. Air power is important, and that can be seen that underutilization of air power by the Russians has resulted in slowing down, and that might be the thing that will actually, in the long term, make them suffer if they don't do something immediately about it. Yes.
Thank you, sir. I think that's very well summarized. It's going to be a whole different world, and a lot of people are not realizing this, that this small, not very, large conflict. It's a small conflict if you look at the area which is in focus right now. As you also mentioned, the war is just in the eastern part of Ukraine. It's not in the west. Cities like Kiev and all that are pretty peaceful. There are minor attacks which have taken place here and there. Having said that, sir, I absolutely agree with you with this whole nuclear question that has been brought into focus because, as you say, the fence sitters, all the fence sitters today will, have their underground facilities or hidden facilities and try and develop the technology so that when needed, they could actually go nuclear and, this thing. So that's going to be I think the 60s and the 70s of the nuclear threats and the nuclear polarization is going to come back. And that's something I thought, and a lot of us thought, is the time is over. Sir, thank you so much. With your great experience in the Indian Air Force, you've been able to analyze and break down the war in Ukraine, especially looking at the air power. What are the mistakes? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages for both the sides? And how the narrative war is being won or lost. Especially with regards to the air power, we can see these videos of a helicopter being shot at from a shoulder-fired missile. We can see videos of Sukhoi going down a couple of days ago with a pilot who was pretty much hated in Syria at one time. So there's a lot happening in terms of the narrative, and you've brought it out very well, sir. Thank you so much once again for joining me, sir. Till next time for another subject. Jai Hind, sir.
Thank you, Aadi. Thank you. Always a very pleasure to be with you. And I must tell you that you're doing an excellent job. I know close to 200 videos are already live. Interviews of yours. I keep seeing them. This is my, I think, fourth occasion that I'm doing an interaction with you. And it's so very important to educate the masses, the Indians, and the world of what is going on. What is our perspective? How does India look at some of these? And hats off to you. Keep up the great work. God bless you. Jai Hind. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words and blessings.